let's look a little bit at some lighting, and then I'll go into materials. All right, I'm actually going to try and not too. No, that won't make the point. It's just that I want to grab that the light. Okay, so what we're going to do is there's a lot of lights in this scene, but basically this shot and the character she has like a classic 3.3 light system where there's a key, fill, and a rim that are lighting her. What I'm going to do is just turn that system on, and we'll just look at her key light that's over here. And to show you when I'm rendering, I can just grab that just to show you what that means in here. And we're lighting in real time, and we're getting real feedback. And I'm just grabbing that one piece right there. All right. Now, if I look at my light interface over here, let me squeeze that a little bit. I lost some numbers. You should see that. I mean, everything from the light, of course, the angle, the cone, the range, the intensity. All of these things are controllable live in here. The light does a lot of stuff. I could talk about the lights for 2 hours, so I'm going to stay around it. But the idea, again, is there's a really important distinction to make, is that as I'm looking at that shot right here, to show you how cool is it, CG artists are conditioned to deal with numbers and fields, whether they're free-floating or relating to real-world numbers. All those things are abstractions. They're always abstractions, no matter how much we want to say that they're real-based. Artists, when you're looking at an image, want to interact with the canvas directly. This is a really important point to make about the workflow, is that when I'm adjusting that angle on that light right now, I no longer look at the slider. I'm actually looking at my image as I'm changing the intensity, right? I'm thinking about my canvas, not about my viewing. This is a really, really important distinction to make of what we mean by a new type of workflow. Okay? You will also notice as I'm getting into these intensities that there are these natural blooms that start to occur. And that is actually because the camera has a particular exposure and HDR settings. And I'll get to that at the end. Okay, so that's the lighting. I mean, to show you can just sit, I'll just play with colors a little bit really quickly. You can see how fun it is to just sit and sketch with the light, just on a key light. Another thing we can do very quickly, if I just, from any workflow standpoint, if I just go and I'll just go and turn off these other lights a second. I'll turn up the lights, and we'll just turn her key light on again. And what I'll do is now I'll just look exactly, I can study, get a preview of the shadow mask over here, and this is really nice because I can kind of play, get a preview of how my lighting, that exact light is working, which is a very, very powerful tool, of course, to think about what that particular, just that light is doing. Or if you see what I'm just looking at just what that one light is doing in the passive. So you can think about the implications down the pipeline. If you're actually going to do a render pass, I can get that light in that render pass for that character out. And I'll try and demonstrate that in the end if I get to the render layers, where you see how you can construct layers. That's completely interactive. You can create a render layer, put an object in it, and then define the passes and the render type. Okay? So let's go back out here a second. And you can see that that's actually looking kind of nice. And let me turn the other lights back on. So we can get that. I could have put another master switch on it. I'm just sort of doing it by group select at the moment. Okay, so back into here. A little bit about materials, and I'll move on. All right, so if you look in here, all the materials are listed, or the character materials are listed in here. I can also select them. This sort of really nice selection of the materials right inside the environment. So I'll just look at that skin shader. Just a little bit about the materials. We support all the usual suspects. So you have blend and Phong and Lambert and surface scatter and a bunch of anisotropic shaders. And there's a whole library of them. These are shaders. You bring the shader in and you can build materials from them. And essentially a material is an organization of different properties of those shaders. So you have texture inputs, you have math operations, you have all the usual things that you would find in building a material. So we're looking here at a subsurface scatter shader, and just to show you that operating, here are sort of the three basic components, which is the unscattered light, and I'll just show you how, well, that kind of is intense, isn't it? But you can really understand layer by layer how that material is being built, and adjust it for your requirement of your shot. It's really kind of fun to play with. Let's play with a little bit of specular values here. And let me dump that down a little. you can see I'm sketching with the material live on the canvas. Now, that's not to say that, I mean, in any production, essentially, you design your materials to work with that particular look and feel. So you could, let me just do this for you a second. I'll open up the material browser, and I'll just save. Let me see the version of that. I'll export to the library, and we'll save, and we'll put that in. And just so, if someone makes any kind of adjustment, well, let's do something a little even crazier here to show you that. I can always grab this and drag this back in and go back. This is important from a workflow situation because all the assets in MachStudio Pro are actually being referenced in. So the only thing that's being loaded here are the conditions of that particular work session that's saved in the file. But the geometry, the material, the animations, the lighting, all essentially can be referenced in from numerous sources. So if you have a wider scale production, you can manage it across the board. That's what I wanted to demonstrate over there. Cool. I won't go, I mean, going into, again, materials can be a whole presentation in itself. So let's, where do I want to go from here? Okay. Really quickly, I don't know if you noticed, but we're actually looking at a depth of field over here. This render is actually doing the real-time depth of field. Let me actually show you that float. That's actually a really interesting thing to see if we actually look at that. We can display for you exactly that depth of what the lens is going to see. This is very important, again, in the project. You can decide to put it in the render here, or you could export that float and put it back in composite later. So again, you have a way of kind of previewing your beauty path, or using our beauty path, or exporting the passes later for defining how you want the beauty path to come. So again, this is essentially a representation of that float, of the depth of field float. Okay. Next thing I should edit that a little bit. Oh no, I won't edit that. I'll just see if I have time. Let me show you a little bit of HDR over here. I know it? No, I'm going to edit it. You see, I'm changing my mind. Just to show you how this works. So I'm just going to pull focus a little bit, so you'll see how quickly I can start to manipulate these numbers. I'm just changing in meters the focal point of this. Now, since these are all open numbers, I can create either very realistic lenses, drive them with very real numbers, or I can just start to push and pull these numbers to create wild lenses that add like a centimeter of a depth of field or so on. So what I'm going to attempt to do over here really quickly is do something really stylized, where I kind of I'm going to try and get her kind of the silhouette of her cheeks out of focus while getting her face in focus. It's kind of a classic, it's a little bit, let's pull back a little bit. You can see I'm playing with the depth of field, and again, I could have done it directly from the other render paths that show you the depth of field float, so you could have a real understanding of what that would look like. Okay, a little bit on HDR. So this is basically there's a high dynamic range panel. Now, this is really, really important to how rendering happens in MachStudio, because everything is passing through that camera. So this is essentially an aperture or exposure. It's totally open. So if I close the aperture, I'm actually letting less light into the camera. Okay, so less light into the camera means a few things. Now it allows me to increase the lumens on that key light. So you notice it's going to start creating a totally different render. Now as it's pushing on that specular path, I'm actually just going to go right in there and actually clamp that manually myself. So you can see as you're dealing with exposures, I'm just essentially going in and adjusting my material in relation to my exposure. So we have a really kind of contrasty image. We're going to make it kind of noir, I guess. And pick up that rim light a little bit. And I know there's a fill light on her here.